and welcome inside the dungeons once again for another episode of Historia Mystoria. Today's mystery: how did the Western Europeans avoid the monopolization of Italian trade in the early 1400s to 1500? Stay tuned and find out here on Historia Mystoria. A monopoly. What exactly is the term monopoly? We've all played the board game, I'm sure, known as Monopoly, and it's something you've heard of before. We even talked about it when we discussed Christopher Columbus in our last episode. But the word monopoly means exclusive control by one group of the production of seller goods or services. And so in other words, it means that I have complete control over one specific object or item. And as we talk about it in this lesson today, you're going to see that we're going to compare monopolies, or what we think could be a monopoly today, and compare that to history in the early 1400s to 1500s. And so, come along with us on our journey as we now discuss what a monopoly is, who had the monopoly of trade during this time period, and how did the Western Europeans actually get around it. To start off today's show, I want to give you an example of exactly what we're talking about in regards to the middleman. Let's say, for example, that you are in downtown New York City, packed full of people, very difficult to walk, and let's say you are living there now and you go past the same place every single day, and it seems like every day that you pass this specific place, you get hungry, and you realize it's the nice smell of a hot dog stand. And at the hot dog stand, they sell hot dogs and pretzels, but they also sell, some more healthy fare, kind of something like a granola bar, for example. And let's say that you just want to hold off until lunch, but you need a snack, and you decide that you're going to buy this granola bar. And the granola bar sells for about $1, all right? And let's just say it does sell for $1 here at this delicatessen. Now, if I were to go in there for, let's say, 15 straight days, then I'm going to be paying $15, all right, for these 15 granola bars. But why would I want to do something like that if I could just skip going to that delicatessen? I could go to a much bigger box store like a Walmart or a Costco or a Kroger, where they sell these same granola bars in boxes. I can buy 15 to 18 of these granola bars, all right, that I'm going to pretty much buy every single day anyway, and I'm going to be able to buy it at a cheaper price. I'm buying it at wholesale instead of buying it retail, all right, like we would if I went into the delicatessen every single day. And so what do I mean when it means to skip the middleman? Well, that's pretty simple. I'm going to buy it for a cheaper price at the bigger store by skipping over the middleman. How do I save money? Again, that retail place is going to buy their granola bars from a wholesale place, and they're going to have to, again, raise the price of what they bought it for so that they could make money. And so what many people started doing, obviously, were going to the big box stores, which is what started putting the mom and pop places and the delicatessens in smaller cities out of business. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what exactly is the middleman. Now you might be asking, well, what in the world does that have to do with history? Why are we talking about that on Historia Mystoria? Well, that's a good analogy of exactly what was happening in the 1400s and 1500s. You've already discussed in world history in 9th grade all about the Roman Empire, and the Italians had been powerful in everything. Powerful in trade, powerful in economics. You name it, the Italians were very powerful at it. And that was the case too with Asian goods. The rest of Europe definitely would have to import things they would want and need from the Asian continent. But the problem was there was no easy way to get there, and the only way to get to Asia to be able to import these things was to go through the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, the issue with that was that the Italians had that monopolized, and so the Italians would ship things in from Asia and India and other places towards the Far East, and then they would then sell those items, as you can see here behind me, to everyone else in Europe. We're talking France and Spain and Great Britain, or of course it was England at that time. And so all these Western European nations said, well, that's really not fair, because we should be able to go across and get to Asia and not have to buy the prices that Italy's putting on these things, because that's, again, not fair. But at that time, no one had a way to get to Asia by selling to the West. We discussed that in the Christopher Columbus episode. And now, the only way you could really get to Asia was by sailing south. And of course, by that, you'd have to go all the way around the tip of Africa. The problem was, no one in Europe had ever done that, or at least lived to tell the tale. That was until 1419, when a man by the name Prince Henry the Navigator. And that brings us to our first character profile of the evening. Prince Henry the Navigator. He was the man who started a school in 1419 who kind of wanted to get the whole idea of exploration going for the Portuguese. He was a Portuguese man, and today we're going to talk about Portuguese exploration and how they're the first ones to actually make it to Asia by sailing around the tip of Africa. Now Prince Henry the Navigator is not the man who is responsible for getting there, but he is responsible for starting the school, which really got people interested. A lot of these young men, young boys who were interested in being adventurous and wanting to become sailors, but not just sailors. How about a captain? How about a navigator? How about a map maker or a cartographer? All of these things were taught at Prince Henry the Navigator's school, all right, for sailing there in Portugal. And he was teaching that really this is the way to get to Asia, but no one had ever done it. No one had gone to the unknown, as it was known, which was the southern part of Africa. No one really knew how far it was to the south. And not only that, again, we're talking before Christopher Columbus, and so you can imagine that almost every explorer pretty much felt that if they sailed too far to the south, that they too would fall off the map, just like a lot of the men during Columbus's time who sailed to the west felt the same thing. And so Prince Henry the Navigator is given credit for opening this school and getting people interested. Now the second Portuguese navigator that we're going to be talking about, or explorer, does do something very, very important for the Portuguese. His responsibility was to make it to Asia by sailing south around the tip of Africa. That was his goal. But he doesn't make it. His name is Bartholomew Diaz. Now Diaz was a very interesting character. Not someone like Christopher Columbus. He was more well-liked, but he still had that rugged side to him. And he's going to set sail from Portugal, and he's going to take this specific route around Africa. Now you'll notice that he doesn't quite make it, that he arrives at the tip of Africa and he lands there. Now we don't know that he might have thought he was already in India or in Asia, but he actually stops, and along the way he finds many different things that they were not used to seeing in Portugal. The most important being, of course, the Africans themselves. And he realized these Africans had never really seen a white man before, and so maybe they began to worship them like gods. Maybe these Africans who felt that they'd never seen something like this before, that this might have been their gods coming to help them or collect them. And now the third man I want to talk about today is another Portuguese explorer by the name of Vasco da Gama. Now da Gama is given credit for being the first Western European man, Portuguese man, to sell around the tip of Africa and make it to Asia. He actually made it all the way to India, which is where a lot of the goods and services were being shipped from, back to obviously Italy, and then obviously on to the rest of Europe. Now, da Gama pretty much took the same route, with the exception of he didn't stay close to Africa. He actually sailed kind of straight down, all right, south in the Atlantic Ocean, and then around the tip of Africa, and then in between the island of Madagascar and Africa. Now, no one really knew what was on Madagascar, and as he went by there, he kind of charted it a little bit and found out, of course, there were many different exotic animals and other things on the island of Madagascar on his way up and around to India. And so as he returns, he realizes that now we can make it, and therefore we don't have to worry about going through Italy anymore, and that the Italians weren't going to be able to monopolize, because yes, it might have taken a lot longer, yes, it might have been just a little bit less price, but they were willing to do it because everyone was tired of paying the very high prices that Italy kept putting on their goods that were coming from Asia. And everyone in Western Europe began to think that it was a lot smarter and a lot cheaper to sell around the tip of Africa and do it themselves. And so because of da Gama, it started to kind of put a light out there into Europe that exploration might be a very smart thing. And to top it off with a cherry, now many people believe that the world probably wasn't flat after all, that you could begin to sell around, not just going up and down, but maybe selling to the west, which is kind of what sparked Columbus's idea of going to the west as well. Finish up here tonight on Historia Mystoria, I want to talk a little bit about something we discussed early on in the show, and that was slavery. Yes, the Portuguese are the first country to bring back slaves to Europe. They did so after obviously finding a lot of them in the southern African kingdoms on the continent of Africa. And they realized that if they were able to use slave labor to do their work, then things could be a lot cheaper to be consumed in their country, and they wouldn't have to rely on countries like Italy and other European nations as much as they did before. And so I like to talk about this early on here in our American history, even though it really doesn't have anything to do with American history, because slavery does become such a major thing and a major black eye on our country, obviously not for another 400 years, but just to give you a number here, between the years of 1441 and 1841, there were over 11 million Africans who were enslaved throughout the world. And you might say, well, that's not really a big number. But think about the time period that we're talking about. We're talking about where the population of the world was not that big. Now, obviously, by 1800s, it was gaining astronomically, but in the 1400s, it wasn't. We didn't have the American continent, the North American continent, where all right, the people are today. And so when you think about that, 11 million Africans enslaved throughout the world was a huge number. So I want you to keep the hold of that until we get to the Civil War, when we talk more about slavery, obviously, in the upcoming months here in class. And once again, I want to thank you for watching Historia Mystoria. I hope you learned something once again tonight. Make sure you continue on with the lesson on Nomia. Make sure you get that turned in and come to class ready to discuss this stuff tomorrow, as we will complete a history lab on this subject. I'm Mr. Sponseller. Once again, thank you. And until you have to hit my button again, so long, good night, and happy mystery solving.